Okay. So we are now recording, and welcome everybody to the webinar that Joe and I have arranged called Thriving in Life and Overcoming Obstacles. As you will be aware from the detail on the event, Joe and I have been talking an awful lot, and we're very comfortable about talking quite openly about matters that could otherwise probably be scrutinised when we're all trying to be so politically correct all the time. It's quite funny, the things that come out when we talk, so we'll see what happens today. But yeah, so welcome all. So Joe is a coach, and he works with property investors in Bristol and surrounding areas, and you know there's a lot more to him as well. You know, we've both got hats that we wear, but essentially that's what Joe does, and it is his coaching that he's sharing with you today, sharing his expertise and knowledge. So what I'll do is hand over to you, Joe, if you want to say hi. And
yeah, sure. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jules, for that introduction. That's very good. So yes, basically, what I want to just put a context to what we're going to be discussing. This is as Jill said earlier, that we have spoken many times before, and our conversations goes in all directions. We talk about everything and anything, and this presentation is born from those conversations that we've had previously, and we thought it would be a great idea to share our conversations with yourselves. So what I'm going to show you is just a series of slides that I've put together, really to start to engage in conversation and really to explore some matters that, you know, we're all having to be an experience over the last few months. So I'm going to now start my slideshow and basically talk through, and Jules, at any stage, as you do, please just come in.
As I do.
And that'd be great.
I say actually to all of you, you know, obviously we know you're there. Just pop any questions in the chat. If you've got questions that you start to think as Joe's doing his presentation, feel free just to pop them in the chat, because when we do open up for some questions later on in the webinar, we can then have them ready there, and I can just read out your questions for either myself or Joe to respond to. And also I know that later on in the meeting we're going to have a few words from Lydia and Rebecca, I think, to offer their advice, you know, in terms of how they sort of cope under these circumstances. So over to you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Jules. Could everyone see my screen? Is my screen visible to everyone, Jules?
Now, I wonder, while I'm recording, I think if I move us over here, I might keep moving us, so it's going to be funny how this comes out in the recording. But yeah, this is clear in terms of what we're going to be recording and sharing. So
Okay.
I can't see responses from other people, but I'm assuming they can see it all okay too.
Okay, great. Well, I'll just go with it. Right. So, as the title suggests, thriving in life and overcoming obstacles. And in order to do so, we really need to be working towards what I call operating our zone of excellence. And towards the end of this slide, I'll discuss exactly what that means. But as we've all been experiencing a series of events going way back from Brexit, COVID-19, and the whole Black Lives Matters. And throughout all of those, and not forgetting obviously the lockdown, which has been incredibly impactful to so many people around the country. So obstacles comes in many ways, in many forms. I just hope so we can have mental obstacles, physical obstacles, emotional obstacles, and perceived obstacles. Now, the thing with obstacles, they could be internally driven from within, and they can be externally as well. So we could be dealing with obstacles that either we ourselves have manifested, or in fact that we are having to deal with, that's coming from either a person or an event or a situation. And it's so important that when we're confronting and dealing with these obstacles, that we're coming from a place where we know who we are, we're able to be strong. Now, less than 3 weeks ago, we had the most tragic event of George Floyd on the 25th of May. And I kind of wanted to sum it up in these two images. On the left, we see the whole campaign of Black Lives Matters, and how George Floyd become a symbol. And it's interesting, and why I particularly picked this picture is the fact that, as it says quite candidly, that, you know, George Floyd is not a wake-up call. This is something that's been going on for 400 years. And on the right-hand side, and the whole purpose of why Black Lives Matters, and this is from my perspective, and this is how I see it, is that you see that young child, and at some stage, that young child is going to have to be explained why she hasn't got a father. And no doubt she will see exactly how her father died. Now, why should any child of any race or ethnicity have to have that experience, have to have that part of their lives? And that is fundamentally what we're talking about. When we talk about Black Lives Matters, we're not saying that we want sympathy. We're not saying that, you know, we want certain advantages. All we want is the recognition. That's all, that our lives matters. And that's what this whole movement is about. And it's incredible to see how many people has really begun to understand this whole thing. And from a Black man talking about this, obviously dealing with the whole matter of racism is a huge obstacle. And the only way I could explain it is that racism isn't a Black thing. It's any more than sexism is a woman's thing. You know, it involves everybody. And that's really the main thing. Now, in our conversation I was having with Jules only last week, we were talking about, and I said that I hope that as a result of this, you know, that we reach a higher level of consciousness, because people quite simply have a choice in their everyday lives, whether to act on their conscience or to carry on as usual. And what I was saying is that I'm hoping that as a result of what's happened at the events of the last few weeks, that we do enter this space of higher consciousness, because as Einstein said, no problem can be solved with the same level of consciousness that created it. That we need to have a higher level of conversations about the whole racism. You know, there needs to be questions asked of each other. And I think many people, for the first time, were asking themselves questions that they never asked themselves before. I have many friends, white friends, who were equally as appalled to witness what they saw, and it created a number of questions for themselves. Now, I cannot answer those questions. Everyone has to go through their own particular journey on what that means to them, how it will mean for them in the future. That's not my responsibility. That's no Black person's responsibility. Everyone has to take responsibility for their own behavior and how they choose to move forward from this situation. Now, another famous African-American man from America said it this way, and I think it really sums it up. Change will not come if we wait for some other person, or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. It's no point, is that we've come to a stage now, we have to act. We can't wait or think, oh, well, it will improve in the future, or worse still, people saying, well, yes, it's not like it was before, but that's not acceptable. You know, from a Black person's perspective, that still isn't acceptable. And so things has to change, but we have to be the ones that will make that change. And I wanted to, this is a model that I've used in my coaching practice. It's very simplistic. I came across it, funny enough, when I was doing business at university, and it was part of a management program. But I use it with coaching clients as a way of actually showing a destination of how our energy goes throughout, and energetically how we deal with situations. So, you know, and this could be an event like George Floyd. It could be something very personal to ourselves, loss of job, a relationship breakdown, a death of a family member. It could be whatever the situation is, we will have to encounter, and we'll go through this whole energy cycle. And the first thing that happens in an event I'll just explain to you from my perspective in terms of when I saw the killing of George Floyd, was that, you know, I went into a place of denial. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I just couldn't believe it. And denial comes with two friends. It comes with delay and distraction. And, you know, sometimes when we have a situation that we can't, you know, accept, we do try to either ignore it, we do try to distract ourselves with other things. And this is one of the reasons why the George Floyd thing was so impactful, is that most people were stuck at home through the lockdown. So we didn't have the normal distractions that we would normally occupy our lives. And as I said, denial comes with its two friends, distractions and delay. But once we kind of get past that, we then go into shock. And shock, it also is accompanied with a bit of anger. Now think of your own situation where you've had an event that's happened to you, and you will start to see how this will actually probably follow the emotional cycle that you had gone through yourselves. And then once we go through that shock, we then come through a point of valley of tears, and that's kind of just basically being with our emotions. It's just accepting where we are at that stage in our lives. And we use the term the valley of tears. And from there, the acceptance, we go into grief, and grief really means loss. What have we lost? Now, you know, if I go back and reflect on the events of George Floyd, for me, the grief for me was that, and I was saying to Jules at this stage, that the loss for me was the belief that I thought things were improving. I thought that things was changing, and maybe in my own little world, it might have appeared to be so. And then something like this, so dramatic, kind of eradicates that. It's also a loss in terms of a belief of humanity, that you think, well, how could another human being do that to another on a very fundamental scale? So there was a huge grief there. And then through that, one starts to search for answers, and you look within yourself and you start to negotiate and you start to process what you've experienced and what you've witnessed, and to try and come to some kind of conclusion, try to find some new answers, a new paradigm to what's going on. Jules, I don't know if you could hear me and if you're able to come in at any stage.
Yeah, I think at this point, when you was explaining this to me the other day, this was how I was able to understand how I could relate, not being a Black person, but what I could relate to was the way you explained how seeing that triggered all of those raw emotions and all of that pain, and like you said, the shock and the grief and the disappointment in humanity, and, you know, all of those things that you're kind of saying. And the only way I could relate to that was through not being vulnerable, obviously, as a Black person, but being vulnerable as a female. And so what would trigger me is seeing child abuse, sexual assault, rape, you know, all of those things that trigger me into a place of fear for me and fear for my child, and the disappointment in humanity and the disbelief that somebody's done that again, and that the education isn't up to scratch and teaching people from a very young age that that's just not okay and things like that. So I think that was the light bulb moment where I thought, there are real wrongs out there, and there are triggers of things. Our own vulnerabilities are triggered by these events that happen, and we're like, oh crap, we're still vulnerable. And how can we change that? And how can we, you know, we've got to heal people through the hurt. And there's a lot of organizations that heal people through the hurt, but we need to stop the hurt happening in the first place. You know, that's where we need to concentrate on the education, and we can't have Black people being vulnerable, or women being vulnerable, or homophobics being vulnerable. You know, nobody should be attacked verbally or physically, or feel unsafe or feel uncomfortable when they walk into a room, because, you know, it's a room full of people who don't, you know, who aren't of the same kind of strength or sex or beliefs or religion or anything like that, you know, and this is all undoable. This is all about, you know, hatred and crime. It's all learned behaviour. And yes, there are primal things that come into effect here, but everybody needs to be taught at base level that that is not okay, that none of this is okay, and to really sort of respect every other human being. We can't keep having people going through this grief, and we can't keep having these horrible things happen to people. And I think that this is what we're doing, you know. It's heartbreaking, and then the likes of you and I have been through our own trauma in life, as we've discussed, you know, so we've been through trauma and we've dealt with grief in its different senses, and we've learned how to ground ourselves in a really good way so that we are really strong. And when you're really strong and your feet are firmly on the floor, yes, these triggers will come and they will punch you in the face and they will knock you sideways, but the triggers won't knock you off of your platform because you're already grounded. Whereas we've got other people out there where these triggers could knock them off their platforms, and they can send them on a downward spiral of hatred, of anger, of lashing out, of not being able to think about it objectively enough to think, okay, what can we do? It's taking positive action. And this is where you go into new answers. You've got to take positive action. Yes, you can't go off on a tangent with anger and hatred. You need to think, okay, there is a problem. We know there's a problem. And how can we tackle this problem so that it's not a problem for other people in the future?
100% agree with what you're saying there, Julie. You know, this model is looking at yourself internally. You know, events, situations, people, things are going to happen, and it's at the end of it is how you as an individual deal with that. And yes, you could be with the emotions of anger and hatred, but then it's how do you channel that energy? Where, you know, and what Jules and I were discussing is about, you know, each and every one of us have choices in terms of what we do with that raw emotion, whatever that pain is derived from. And the first thing, you know, is the acknowledgement that we could only work with ourselves. We can't change other people as much as one could try to. We could only influence, and the best way of influence people is by your own behavior and by how you conduct yourself. You know, and when, you know, Black people talk about saying they're tired, is because, you know, the responsibility is placed upon us to try to explain what our experiences is like. And I understand, if I just talk from my own experience. In the last few days, I've had conversations with various people, some very good friends, and this particular person, a white person, was really supportive, really understood exactly, you know, tried to, you know, had a great deal of empathy of the situation and understanding of what I was sharing with them. But during the conversation, she made reference to someone that she knew in the past, and she referred to this person as being a colored person. Now, you know, she might have thought that using the term colored was more kind of, I don't know, nice, as opposed to saying a Black person. But and she didn't mean anything by it, but that's just a very simple example of how, when it is so endemic, it's very difficult to start to decipher, well, what's right and wrong, and because it's a completely different experience from a Black person. And sometimes, and that's the difficulty in trying to explain it, because, it's like air. If you can't see it, then you don't know what the problem is. It's only when air is taken away that you discover the importance of air. So this model is really about looking at yourself. It's about what you can do for yourself. And as it gets to the point with the new answers, and I've used this model for myself in many different situations. At times when it may be a work situation or a personal situation, relationships or something like this. I kind of go through this, and I get to this point of new answers, and with new answers comes a set of new rules. And for me, these are my rules. These are the rules that I kind of try and work by. You're welcome to adopt them if it feels it fits with you. And the first rule is to funk everyone. Now, I don't mean that in some kind of aggressive or mean way, but there's a realization that you're responsible for yourself. You can't go through life making excuses in order to make other people feel comfortable. You have to be authentic to yourself. That's the first thing. You have to be true to yourself. And that's what I mean. And I don't mean that in an aggressive way. I just mean that having that reassurance of who you are. Love yourself. You're going to die anyway, is rule number 2. So don't play small. I spend most of my life trying to play small in terms of don't want it to be seen. I don't want the attention and that negative attention. I would avoid going to certain places when I was younger just so that I didn't attract that attention. And it becomes part of your whole mental thinking. And I'm sure some of you watching this will have situations where you start to play small. You don't want the attention. The fact is that you're going to die anyway. So why not make the most of the life and the time you have on this planet? It's a very small amount of time. So why not live it fully and be fully present? Yeah. And the realization, I'm sure many of the people watching this will come to terms, and if you haven't, wise up. There's no cavalry coming. There is going to be no shining knight coming to save you. You're going to have to get out of this ditch yourself. And when I talk about that ditch, I mean that whole emotional journey that you may be on, that self-discovery of who you are. You're going to have to do that yourself. You can't look outside. You can't think, well, if I met this person, then I will be okay. Or if no, that's not it. That's not the answer. You've got to look inside. That's the only place where you're going to find the answer.
Similarly, praying, if I can just cut in there, Joe, because we did talk about this and you touched on it earlier as well, about what your beliefs are, what your belief system is. It's all very well to pray to whoever it is you're praying to, whether that's the universe, God, Buddha, whatever. But you've got to take steps forward. You can't just pray and expect people to do things, and things to change. You need to take action, and you need to, like you said, you need to be unafraid to use your voice. It's funk everybody thing, and you're going to die anyway. We just need to speak out and just be true and authentic. And the biggest life-changing moment for me was realizing that there are a lot of people out there who are not going to like what I'm doing and what I'm saying. And as soon as you stop minding, that doesn't matter. What matters is the people that do want to hear what I'm saying and what I'm doing. And you take it on the chin, and you think, I think that comes with age as well. When enough people are horrible to you, you think, I can take it on the chin. Fill your boots. What, I've got something to say, and I'm going to say it. There are people out there who need help. So, I'm going to use my voice, and whilst I'm living this very short, precious life that we've got, I'm going to see if I can do something positive. And we've all got to do that. We've all got to take that responsibility. We can't expect everybody else to make these changes and save us, and buying lottery tickets and all of these things. You've got to get out there and do absolutely everything that you can do in your power to say what you think needs to be said, and work as hard as you possibly can for the outcome that you're looking to achieve. Sorry.
Absolutely, 100%. No, that's perfect. It really sums up what I'm saying, and that really, what you were saying actually leads to my final rule, and that is create a fire inside. And what I mean by that there's a point when a fire gets so hot that no matter whatever's thrown at that fire, it just becomes fuel. There'll be times like a burning building where the fire brigade said, well, it's pointless us even trying to put hose on it because it just evaporates the water. So you need to have that kind of fire within you, that whatever's thrown at you, whatever's chucked at you, you use that as fuel. And that is going to move you forward. That is what you're going to need. So these are the 4 rules that I kind of live my life by, because sometimes if I have a little pity party, and we all sometimes do, I'll go and say, oh, woe is me. Why didn't that client blimmin' phone back and, you know, and do that work, you know, done all that work and everything. I got to get over it. That's just the situation, you know. Pain is compulsory, suffering is optional.
Yeah,
And
that's so
sometimes,
true.
you know, we sometimes we get mixed up with the two. And if somebody, if you physically get harmed, yes, you're going to feel pain. But if you choose to suffer emotionally, that's an option. And sometimes it's very hard for people to accept that. And I've had clients who want to argue to the sky goes green and say to me, well, it's down to that person. It's really up to you what you choose, you know, and that's the point of taking self-responsibility.
Yeah, and we talked about that choice, didn't we? And that is true, because like you said, pain is compulsory. Like, we all know that there is no way you can go through life without pain in some way, shape or form. But the suffering, aside from grief, whereas suffering is a natural, you know, effect of grief, you have to let yourself heal through that grief. The other pain, it is compulsory, and quite often pain comes from a choice that you are making or you are not making. And
It's very true.
you know, and what I mean by that is, you know, we talked about pain in a relationship, or the pain of leaving a relationship, and or the pain of a complicated relationship. It doesn't matter what kind of pain you're experiencing. You need to completely accept and take responsibility of the choice that you've made for that pain to be part of your life, and to accept that as a part of the choice that you've made. Because whilst pain is compulsory, it's also short term. And that's the best thing. Pain does stop every time, but you need to go through the pain if you want to gain.
It's true, you know, and I'll make a further distinction without wanting to get too deep in this whole subject matter. But you know, pain is an act against your physical body. You know, you put your hand on a hot stove, you burn yourself, or someone hits you, you feel the physical pain. That's your body, but you're not your body. That's not who you are. You know, and unfortunately, that's again is something that we can't always get our head around, because we live in a very physical world. So we believe sometimes that we are our body, and then we get confused because then we associate what we do to be who we are. And I was saying to Jules when we were talking on one of our conversations that, you know, some of her members may, you know, identify and saying, oh, I'm a single mother. Well, that's not who you are. That's something that you do. That's a function that you may be performing as a single mother, but that does not define who you are. And sometimes we get so attached to labels that it begins to distort our reality. And then once that happens, we start to put limitations on ourselves, because we start to think, well, I'm not expected to do this, you know. Again, in one of our conversations, I was explaining to Jules with my daughter. I wasn't with her mother, so my daughter, who's dual heritage, and she ticks a number of criteria at the school that she was attending, and the criteria, well, we didn't notice until it came to light that because she was a dual heritage girl living with a white mother, and on the basis of that, they said academically that the best you could do with your qualifications is get a C grade. And it was based on those two criteria. Now, my daughter and I and her mother, we didn't accept that. We did not accept that one iota. And in fact, our daughter left with straight A's. Now, if my daughter was of a belief, or if her parents were of a belief and said, well, yeah, you know, we'll have to accept that because that's who you are, you've got to get, then, you know, we set a limitations. And sometimes we do that to ourselves. You know, we take what's and someone else's opinion and we make that become our reality. And what Jules and I are saying is that that's not the case. You create your own reality. Everyone's got an opinion, and it's just it's a significant is the hole in the rear of themselves. You know, everyone's got one. But so don't not make it your reality when someone says something about you. So at the start, I was saying about being operating in your zone of excellence, and what does that mean? What, you know, it's like being in flow. That's mean living an engaged life. But the first thing you need to do, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. I just want that just to sink in. Sometimes we forget. We love our children, we love our parents, we love our partners, and we do everything for everybody else, but sometimes we forget ourselves. And especially you deserve to love yourself because you are the most important person in your life, like forever. You know, many people may come and go, friends, partners, colleagues, but you will always stay. So what does that look like in a practical kind of way? So it's 6 things. Physical health, making sure that you take care of your physical health, looking at you doing, you know, the food that you eat, taking regular exercise, particularly in the period that we just come through with this COVID-19 and this lockdown. You know, doing any kind of activity, 5 minutes, just doing squats will help. Walking around your garden will help. Any kind of physical activity, depending on your own ability, but it is important that you give that time. Continuous personal development. I believe that everyone is a lifelong learner. You know, education and learning does not end when you leave school or university. And I'm sure all of you would agree that some of your best learnings happened outside of those institutions. And you have to see yourself as always a work in progress. And don't be too hard on yourselves when you're not achieving the success that you were hoping for. You're doing the best you can with the resources that you have available to you at that time. So don't ever be too hard on yourself if you're not possibly hitting those goals or those targets that you set yourselves. And that leads into self-acceptance. Who you are. Now, I don't mean standing in front of the mirror and saying, "Oh, Joe, you look amazing. You're an incredible looking guy. I love you. I love you. I love that." That's not what I'm talking about. That's just loving the physical face. That's not who I am, as I said earlier. But self-acceptance of who you are, because once you know who you are, then no one could do you no harm. There's an old African saying, and it goes that if there's no enemy within, then no enemy outside could do you no harm.
Yeah.
Number 4, find a purpose in life. Find a purpose. Sometimes it comes as a bundle of joy, and that becomes your purpose. It could be a hobby, any passion. Find something that you enjoy doing. You know, anything that you find. If people say, "Well, I don't have a purpose. I don't know what a purpose is," and I will say to those people, "Well, tell me something that you enjoy doing. Something that basically you lose time. You don't think it's time. You've got this massive energy." And then they say, "Oh, it's the," and I say, "Well, that's the place to start. Whatever that may be, that's the place, because through that you will find your purpose later on." Environmental mastery through a clear mind. And what I mean by that is, like, currently the situation we find ourselves in now. You know, we started this talking about George Floyd. And here in Bristol, we had Colston coming down. Now, I was on a talk a few weeks ago with a group of Black men and women, and we were discussing the whole situation. Now, it's only 3 weeks on, but already there's a very small minority of people who are acting very, I would only classify them as very right-wing in terms of some of the comments that's being projected, some of the damages that they're doing. And this is a sad reality. And this is one of the things that most Black people is aware of, that the moment that we kind of sometimes put our head above the pulpit, it can provoke a lot of anger and hatred by just a small minority. But unfortunately, we can't ignore it because of their actions and their behavior. You know, I could be walking down the street and then someone will drive past in a car and shout the N-word. And and everybody knows what that means, and it's just really just knocks you for a six. And it's being able to cope with those situations and be able to absorb that. I don't say accept it, but absorb it in a way that it doesn't totally destroy you. It is draining, it's exhausting. It's like some of your members in your group may get tired of the projection that people have as soon as they say, well, actually, I've got a young child at home, so I may not be able to do those certain hours. I was hoping, and then they suddenly go into this whole narrative that typical, single mom, they want the best of both worlds, blah, blah, blah. And you're having to have to deal with that continuously, and that can become exhausting and tiring. And so you need to be able to control yourself in that situation. You need to be able to take that, but still keep striving forward, keep moving forward. Do not let that deflect what your mission is and what you're trying to achieve for yourself or for people who depend upon you. And finally, positive relationships, first with yourself and with others. And I think when I first met Jules, it was on a business networking event, and we were talking, and then that led to another conversation. And I said to Julian, I don't wish to embarrass her now when I say this, that I have so much admiration for what she's trying to do and the space that she's creating for her members, and the bigger challenge in terms of changing the narrative in terms of how people perceive working mothers, and I think that's just incredible, and it's something that I wholeheartedly support, and do anything that within my powers to help change that narrative, because society owes a huge debt, and it really does lead to my final slide, really. Marcus Rashford, took it upon himself to make changes, to force the government to make changes. And one of the larger benefactors of this are single mums with children, as his mother was. Again, there is society, you are unseen, mothers with children. There's an acceptance that you'll just get on and carry on. And Marcus Rashford brought it to the front. He brought it onto the agenda. He made people start talking about it. And then there was a realization and a recognition and an understanding that actually there's more that we should be doing for these people, for these families. And I think when I was 22, I couldn't find my ass with both hands. So I am just so impressed with Marcus Rashford, a 22-year-old. And again, he's faced many judgments and prejudices, his background, his growing up, and even as a professional footballer. But for him to take this stand, it just shows what can be achieved. And he sums it up beautifully when he says, I don't even know what to say. Just look at what can do when we come together. This is England 2020. And that is really what it's about. It's about coming together, about working together. And on that, I wish to end this little presentation.
That's fantastic. Can you just go back to the last slide for me, Joe? Because I want to pick up on a couple of things that you said there.
Sure.
Yeah, I love the platform that Marcus has just created. And it's so true what you said. It is exhausting. It is exhausting constantly battling and constantly explaining yourself, and I think that's why I've created this platform, because I have been that person to explain over and over and over again to landlords why they should let me have their property despite being a single mum, sometimes in receipt of benefits that needed to help me at the time. And you're constantly trying to prove that you're a decent human being, and you're constantly trying to prove that yes, you might have some obstacles, but you're just trying to constantly get people not to treat you like this, treat you like scum, really, and like vermin of society. And I think and I love having the platform. I've had so many people contact me. I've got members, but I've also got other people who reach out to me because they know that they're in a safe space immediately because of what I'm sharing, my status. But crucially, my work is about humanity. And I've been blogging for years, and I've written a book about happiness and humanity. And for me, it's always been about just getting people to be kinder to each other, from the simplest thing to understanding how much pressure you're putting on a person if you tailgate them on the motorway, how you can literally put them in a state of increased anxiety and stress, and understanding how that impacts everybody. And if you're rude to the shopkeeper or the waitress, that, you know, there's so many ways that we can be decent human beings. And when you talk about continuous personal development, I was certainly ignorant in my 20s. You know, I was an estate agent and I did turn people away based on their status. And so you need to forgive yourself, you need to accept the mistakes that you've made. And this is why I consistently say that the government are not adequately qualified to do what they're doing, in terms of there's genuine ignorance there. And I never mean that to be rude, but there's genuine ignorance, because if you don't understand what these issues are, and if you've never felt it or you've never seen it firsthand, like Marcus has with his mum, if people who have got the power and the platform to make changes don't do it because they don't understand those issues, then we all need to use our little voices to try and create this ripple effect of helping this understanding. So we've all got a purpose in life, and I know you said about telling people to help find their passion and what they enjoy and things like that, but equally your purpose can be inspired by what you hate. And I don't like the word hate, because hate means you're still carrying some anger and you're still harbouring some ill feeling there. But something that really upsets you, that triggers you, you recognise when something sends you into spin, then that might be signposting you to your purpose. And you don't necessarily have to be an activist to change that, but you can think, okay, something's triggered me, there's a problem here, how can you might want to go back to sort of educational research or something like that, but you can do your little bit. We've all got a little bit that we can do, and our experiences will help signpost us to what it is that we need to do to have a purpose, to do a little bit. You could be testing, you can be, you could be hit by tragedy in the family, with ill health, with, disease or anything like that. And so you could be inspired, then your purpose in life might be go to work in a testing lab to find the cure, or to help find the cure. So there's so many ways to tap into what's triggering you, either passionately in a good way or passionately in a bad way, but they all signpost you to sort of figuring out what you need to be doing, either as an income or in your spare time. The Single Mums Business Network isn't an income for me, it's my spare time. I've got work that I do to pay for everything. The positive relationship with self and others, there was a comment before and this is part of the ignorance, and I think, and this is what's really heartbreaking, and this is where I know it's safe to say this with you. People are saying, well, it shouldn't the issue be that somebody's been killed. They don't see that it's an issue that it was a black person. They see an issue that somebody was killed. And I'm like, the point is you are more vulnerable. And like, if a woman was raped, it wouldn't be an issue that there are rapists out there. It would be that women should feel safe, because it's very unlikely that a man would be raped in the same way walking through it happens, but it's very unlikely. And I think it's recognising that there are real vulnerables, and as a black person, you're going to be a lot more vulnerable, and you're going to be, and I think that's what I want to try and help people understand. Being human is about understanding that there are people more vulnerable, and they need to be safe. And I'd like to know your thoughts on that, because it's a really tricky, I don't quite know how to explain it.
I think with that, and I've had the same when people say, well, all lives matter, which kind of really do annoy me. And I would use this analogy, which was shared with me, and I think it's a very good way. It's like if you were had a broken arm, you went into the hospital and to see the doctor, and as you're going in with your broken arm, and the doctor decides to check your leg, your left foot, your right shoulder, and you're saying to the doctor, it's my arm, and the doctor said, well, yes, but all your body matters. That's what we're talking about here. The focus, we're not saying Black Lives Matters and ignore everything else. We're just saying that for so long we haven't had that acknowledgement that our life matters, because we haven't been able to, we're tired of constantly trying to explain and trying to make changes. 20 odd years ago, I was working with Metropolitan Police shortly after the Steve Lawrence killing, and the Macpherson report in basically helping young constabulary police men and women who were recruited from all parts of the country. Some of them was recruited from the valleys of Wales, never ever in their entire lives have been in contact or as much as seen a person from the Black and minority ethnic. And then suddenly to work for London and then be sent to Brixton, which has a high population of Black and ME people. So obviously they were in a state of fear because they never had to deal with that. They couldn't understand that. And this is 20 years ago we was doing this work. And we still have not seen the changes. We have not seen any implementations of any of the recommendations that was done in the Macpherson's report. And then when we hear Boris Johnson talk about doing another piece of research, every Black person in the country shoulders sunk because we thought, here we go again. The evidence and the research is there. All we want someone to do is to act on that. That's what we want, and that's the frustration. So when people say, well, it's an isolated case, no, it isn't. And I know for many people, the 25th of May was the first time that they had any real idea of what's going on. And that's the situation as it is. But now, and it's been encouraging to see the people who was doing the marches, it's almost a 50-50 split between Black and white, because people are saying this has to change. This is wrong. We cannot continue like this. And it's not for the benefit solely of BME people, but for all people. It's a human race. It's not, everyone benefits. Because if we show that to one group of people, we will show it to all groups of people.
Yeah,
I have conversations with people with mothers that's got disabled children and they're not being supported. It could be disabled people. We got transgender people coming out and, raising their arms at what, the authors of Harry Potter said the other day. So it's about treating everybody equally. That's what this is about.
Yeah, we've got a lot of small-mindedness, and we've got a lot of judgment. And I think this comes back to what you were saying about education in schools, about positive Black role models and learning about history properly there, because it's at root level that we connect to each other. We have the majority of press around Black people, for as long as I remember, has been negative stories, either a crime incident or a drug incident or something like that. So people are going to think it's like reporting on gypsies. People think all gypsy travellers are bad because all the reporting is on the negative stuff, on the small group who will, who will cause problems. And then you've got, I don't know why anybody's got a problem with transgender or gay. I mean, that's their private lives. It's, but people will judge people for the way they look based on the only thing they've ever heard or seen. And if they've only ever heard or seen negative reporting on a particular race or colour or gender or religion, if they're only hearing the negative stuff, they're going to tar everybody with the same brush. Like the single mums, if you've got a few who will have a lifestyle choice where they're like, oh yeah, have a kids, get a house, and really not taking any responsibility for thinking these things through. We've got small minorities in every colour, in every situation, in every religion. And then you've got people who are enabling themselves to be judgmental and ignorant and tarring everybody with the same brush and therefore treating them as though they are guilty. And I think this is the thing, they're treating, Black people are still treated as though they are guilty in a great sense, and single mums are still treated as though they are guilty, lifestyle choice, work shy, even people with tattoos are still treated as though they're a little bit, scary or whatever, and religion as well. Muslims, you've got some people who think that they are bad because there's a small minority who will, cause issue and be extremists and stuff like that. So it's ignorance. We need to really, really educate everybody to see everybody to see the real mix that we've got going. Everybody's human, and we can't portray any race or any religion as being negative. And I don't know, you shouldn't have to walk down the street and feel judged or vulnerable at all, or suffer abuse.
Totally agree. Totally agree with what you're saying.
I don't even know what I just said. I just go on a tangent and say something. But anyway, 11:35. So we need to wrap up.
Yeah.
I want to see if there are any questions. Now, Lydia was going to share her.
I'll just stop sharing the screen so we can see everybody.
Okay. So yeah, Liz asked better. Yeah, Liz was going to offer some words of wisdom.
Do you want to still be recording this now, or?
I will. I wonder if anybody wants to come in while I'm recording it. No, I will stop recording it actually, but what we'll do is we'll stay here for 10 minutes. So I'll open up the microphones and the videos. So if any of you want to come in and say hi, ask any questions, it's a very difficult conversation to have. So even if you want to say something, you know, that Joe and I can sort of look at again, because we talk a lot and we're planning on talking a lot more about humanity and well-being and helping people with all of these challenges. So yeah, I'll stop the recording. And so I'm Julie from Single Mum Business Network. Joe does coaching in Bristol and the surrounding areas. He wears so many hats, but one of them is his property investor network. And can I mention the group in Bristol?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the Yes Group is called the Yes Group. Yes Group in Bristol. Lots of positivity there, loads of really uplifting stuff. So do take a look. I'll put the links on the YouTube info anyway, and we'll share this later. So thanks guys for watching. I'm going to stop recording, but for those of you who are here, participants, feel free to open up your videos and microphones. We'll be here for 8 more minutes and we will stop at 11:45 sharp. Okay, all right, bye.